Justin, awesome to be here with you today.
Awesome to be with you here, Don. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no, the topic that we're going to be diving into is just like the pending wealth and leadership transition that's going to be happening in small business over these next 10 years. Like the stats are absolutely eye-popping and it's like
Oh,
very, very interesting to really think about, all these different aspects that need to be, considered when making this transition. Now, before we dive into that and some of those specifics, Justin, would love to have you share a little bit about your background and what you do and how you help small businesses.
yeah. So I spent 20 years working within one of the legacy family businesses, which is Nordstrom, learning kind of how they developed that organization to the thriving 100-year, some odd year development of their company. And then I've spent the last 5 years working with small to medium sized businesses, a lot of family businesses. I got my master's in human behavioral psychology, and I've studied under Patrick Lencioni for the last 4 years around working genius, strategic clarity, ideal team player, five dysfunction. So all those organizational development and health frameworks. And so now I get the pleasure of helping grow and develop the next generation of leaders and helping those leaders who are going to be going off into the sunset in the next 5, 10 years, helping them create that plan that leads to their success.
That's awesome.
I'd love to hear, I'd love the audience to hear more about what you do as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I work in investment and wealth management, and my core client demographic is small businesses. So helping these small business owners not only with operating and running effective retirement plan benefits, but also their personal wealth management as well, and their eventual transition from being the small business owner to being retired. Absolutely love what I do. I mean, as an advisor, you have such an opportunity to make such a meaningful impact in a person's life, in a family's life, and to me, like every single case, I really love getting to know my clients in a very deep level. So understanding their core values, the vision that they want in their future, and the financial goals that they're hoping to accomplish. And it is amazing to see, with a focused effort and plan and good execution, what you can accomplish together. And so it's just something that continually inspires me every day. And ultimately, my where I see myself fitting in is just being that person to help clarify and help these dreams come true. So again, really really love that whole process.
Well, that's why we do so well as a tandem, because I love helping them create the clarity and
Yeah.
develop that team that's high functioning and striving for excellence. And with that clarity, then you refine that clarity with your wonderful discernment, and then help them execute and create that plan for the future that's gonna make them happy and retired and living the good life, or the people who are developing into the leaders of the next generation. So yeah, you very talented man. I know that, Dominic, from our time together.
Oh, absolutely, and the same about you, Justin. Like, I love seeing your passion and like the way you can break down scenarios and situations and like really help bring the best out of people. So it's just really awesome partnering with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, should we dive into the show topic a little bit more? And I
Yeah,
think
let's do it.
what I like to do is again set the stage. So, I have some stats here, and again, like crazy stats. So, more than half of business owners are 55 years or older, according to the U.S. Census Bureau survey. With the youngest baby boomers set to reach retirement age in 2030, roughly they estimate that 75% of business owners would like to exit their business within the next 10 years. That is like
Wow.
mind blowing, right?
So
Uh,
crazy.
yeah, so crazy. So, as we think about this, I'd like to highlight some of the challenges a little bit more. And
Yeah.
one of the common themes that I see, and I'm sure you see it too, Justin, is that as a business owner, you're busy. You have a lot of stresses, and like you're focused on operating and growing your business. And so this is a topic that I feel like often gets pushed to the side. It's like, well, I'm not quite
Yeah.
ready to retire yet, but that being said, there is a lot of urgency in terms
Oh,
of thinking about this problem, looking at the different opportunities, and being proactive. So Would love to hear your thoughts on it, and the importance of getting started sooner as opposed to getting started later.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's what I'm seeing with a lot of clients I work with is a lot of what you're saying. Like they're looking to retire either in the next couple years, 5, 10 years, or some of them they want to stay on, but they want to kind of transition into more of like a what do we call a sage advisor role. And
Right.
whether it's kind of that sage advisor role, depending on what their strengths are and where they find enjoyment and fulfillment, or they want to fully retire and exit, yeah, you have to build a foundation. You have to build a strategic vision and a plan. And I'm going to speak more to those that want to have the next generation of leaders stay on and buy the business and continue it compared to just selling it and having a brand new company come in and take it on. And with that, it's really about first building the foundation of a solid leadership team
Yeah.
that's younger, that's really passionate, and then they take it on as like ownership for it themselves. And
Mhm.
then how are you creating that strategic clarity and plan and vision that you can get the entire company, not just the owners, but everyone below them on board, inspired, and driving towards those goals. And when you can do that, then the people who are retiring, their profitability is going up, the value of their company is going up. They then have people who can step into that role and who are growing into the leader that they need to be. And they're leveraging and understanding their gifts and talents and what that leadership team, their makeup, so that they can fill in the gap of that experienced, wise, really talented, probably CEO or maybe CEO and COO. And they can then start to make that transition. And making that transition slowly is why we need that 5 years. So they can, it's not just an abrupt ripping the band-aid off, but they can slowly dip their toes in the water and get to a point where there's that slow bridge building and transfer of power. And without that, it can be devastating when you just rip it off and everyone's kind of left, or people start leaving because there's no direction. I've seen that a lot. No strategic, clear plan. Everyone's like, oh, there is a plan for the next 20 years. So there's a place for me in the company, instead of, oh, I think I need to go get another job because I don't know what the next generation looks like. And no one's communicated that vision to me. And I'm a talented guy and other companies want me. So then they have a huge excess of talent that leaves right when they need to invest and keep that talent in the company. And so if they're not looking on the business and they're just looking in the business during that time, it's going to be too late. And I've
Yeah.
seen it, and it's devastating
Totally.
for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you covered so much in that. I do want to go back to some of these like components that you shared and like break it down a little bit more. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think the fundamental question, like when you think about selling your business, what are you selling? Right.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if all of this wisdom and knowledge is only in your brain, your
Hmm.
ability to make that transition in a successful way and get provide that value, or someone is willing to pay a meaningful amount for that value, is like there's this massive gap there, right? And
Oh,
whether you're
totally.
selling to the next generation of leaders, or some other external entities, like that has to be clearly mapped out and clearly defined. And I think another thing I do want to circle back on that you brought up is like being in an organization where there's not that long-term strategic clarity about
Mhm.
an individual's career progression, kind of the next steps and the future responsibilities that they have, and where there's not that mentorship, like it can be frustrating, incredibly frustrating, right? And I agree
Oh,
with you. I think that's absolutely a component as to why people are willing to leave an organization, even if they've been there for 5 years or 6 years. I mean, even if they're really good at their job, if they want to grow and they want to progress their career, but there's no clearly defined path for them, like it's if another organization is paying $5,000 or $10,000 more, it becomes very easy to walk away. So like I think
gotcha.
that point, like of having that long-term strategic clarity is important, even if you're not looking to sell your business over the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like, I'll give you an example. A company I was working with before we started doing strategic planning offsites and
Mhm.
working genius sessions, which is this model by Patrick Lencioni, where it helps you identify a team's strengths and also their weaknesses and how they fit together within the life cycle of the workflow. They had one guy who was a project manager, very successful with the company. He was a real asset. And when we did the training, the strategy session, he was telling me that like he was on the verge of leaving, not because he didn't love the culture, because they're good people there, but
Yeah.
because there was some people wanting to bring him in. He's like, yeah, I don't know where my career is going to be in 10 years. I don't know if the owners are going to retire and sell. I don't know what's going to happen. And I think if there's not clarity and alignment within an organization,
Mhm.
then it creates a lot of misunderstandings, a lot
Absolutely.
of right, a miscommunication, feelings of nervousness,
Yeah.
and then they're less likely to put all their eggs in that company's basket.
Hmm.
And every time you lose a quality employee like that, which happens all the time when your culture isn't on lock, then it's 20 to 200% of their annual salary is the cost when you have
Wow.
that instability, which is what's going to happen when you have these leaders who are potentially retiring and there isn't clarity around what the next 5, 10, 20 years is going to look like. Yeah,
Yeah.
take that, because you have to think of all the different angles that goes into
Right.
turnover,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I hadn't actually heard that stat, but that does not surprise me at all. So, to really think about it from that perspective too, I think is very helpful. Moreover, like bigger picture, like going through this whole exercise, I think it really forces business owners to think about how to create and craft a business that is successfully able to run without them, and that can alleviate a ton of pressure, right? I've seen, unfortunately, some business owners where it's like a lot of these processes, a lot of these decisions, like it all just flows onto their plate, and so they end
Mhm.
up working harder and harder and harder, and they're making more money, which is like fantastic, but like they get to the point where they're just like burnt out and
Oh,
they can't do it anymore.
100%. And there's something called founder syndrome, which you've probably heard of, right? Have you heard of that one?
Mhm.
Right. So it's like, and these folks, like they're the owner, they're the visionary.
Yep.
Everybody kind of looks to them. They're everything flows through them, as you said.
Mhm.
And the problem is you can't create that environment where you don't have to work because other people can step up. So there has to be that transfer of ownership
Yep.
that occurs, not financially. The
Mhm.
first ownership, right, is a leadership succession of ownership of those individuals being bought in and feeling confident that the owner or the leaders are actively trying to draw them into a more decision maker role. So then
Yes.
but it's so hard to let go of your baby, and I've
Totally.
experienced that running a charity for foster youth where I was the founder and the visionary, and it took me in a couple of years where I had to actively talk never in I but in we, and really start to draw out other people and leverage their gifts and really invite them to take on things even when they don't do it as well or how I want them to do it, but knowing that I need to coach and develop and not just take it on myself, and that it's that we that a founder has to delve into more to
Yeah.
start, that really makes it possible for people to go, oh, this is us, and oh, he does or she does want me to take that on and start to take a more lead role in decision making and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to pivot and change gears a little bit. And
Yeah,
one of the things
let's do it.
you brought up was crafting a successful leadership transition, and it does kind of interlay with what you just shared. I mean, what do you see as some of the most common sticking points in creating an effective leadership transition? Is it, just the fact that, as you mentioned, like not wanting to delegate, as much, or what are the common things that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you don't know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
a lot of these leaders, especially if we're talking family businesses that
Mhm.
are on the smaller side, more of that, like maybe 10 to 75 employees,
Mhm.
like they're so good working in the business, but they don't really understand maybe the process of the exit planning side from a financial perspective and just the steps, and it feels overwhelming. So there's that side of it, right? Which is where you provide so much value. And then there's a side that maybe they've never even done a strategic leadership team offsite. I've had multiple clients, they don't even know what that is, or they don't even know how to do it, or that it's important. Even just having monthly strategy meetings can be a stretch. So I find the number one thing is being able to have a model, number two, one and two, having a model like Working Genius that
Yeah.
can help facilitate them being able to feel comfortable doing something like an offsite, start and do strategy meetings, and then getting them comfortable with having a cadence of meetings throughout the year that
Yeah.
forces and encourages them to work on the business, to be thinking about those 1 5 year plan. How are they moving into other markets? How are they developing their team? Like all those things that when you're in the business and being reactive because you're so busy and there's so many fires that you feel like you don't have time to work on
Yeah.
the business, and they have to change that mindset. They have to have the NASCAR analogy, like you have to slow down on the turns to go fast, and you have to take the pit stops at the right times.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're going to run out of gas. So unless they see that it's not that they're too busy, it's like they have to make this a priority to schedule the time throughout the year to delve into these like essential topics that if they don't do, they'll just never get where they want to get to.
Yeah. I once saw this cartoon, and it showed these cavemen, and one was built this cart, and the tire was a square. And someone was like, trying
I've
to
seen that.
come to him and like show him this tire that was this round rock, right? And his response was, no, I'm too busy pulling.
Yes,
and,
right?
and yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think that NASCAR analogy is just absolutely spot on. Like, it's just so tempting to be like, oh my goodness, so much needs to be done in the business, right? And like
Yes.
not be disciplined to take that time. But when you're able to do it and do so effectively, it just can help operations run so much more smoothly, and
Oh.
like really helps the cohesiveness of the team.
Well, and on that same note, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, like Stephen Covey, he's my hero. Rest in peace. But efficiency versus effectiveness. We're also focused on being busy that we don't do the most important things. And so that's like the square wheel
Yep.
compared to the round wheel, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that is so important that ties back into the Working Genius is I've seen this many times where if you don't spend the time to align roles, whether it's a new leader going into the next role, or just looking at what you have on your team and aligning them to people's energy giving strengths, we call them God-given gifts and talents or geniuses. That also is a huge stumbling block because
Yeah.
you can work super hard and grit and determination, and you can do that for a certain amount of time, but it's not sustainable if you're not taking the time to look at your team and to put people into positions like on the baseball field, put people in positions where they're going to be successful. If you put Buster Posey in center field, he's not going to be as good. He's super talented, he's still going to
Yep.
try,
Yep.
but you put him at catcher, or maybe when he was at shortstop in college, and it's a better fit. Just like if you put a center fielder behind the plate at catcher, that's not going to work out very well, right? And so same goes for a business. Is
Mhm.
like, are we aligning roles to people's strengths where they are put in a position to thrive? And that's what creates the momentum for those leaders who are taking over. It's like, hey, let's imagine, like, as a sage advisor, what's your ideal thing that can support the business, but um, not be stressful for you? And what's the role for these leaders that plays to their strengths, so you have a cohesive and dynamic leadership team? And that creates, everybody gets a win-win, and we all want win-wins, right?
Absolutely. Now let's dive into a little bit more. When you say sage advisor, and we touched on this briefly earlier, I think many business owners, when they've been in business for so long and they've built up, this business through their, hard work and sweat and blood and tears, right? It becomes very hard to separate your identity from that business. And one of the first things I think, business owners really need to think about, especially when thinking about this, big transition, is, what does your ideal future look like? Where's where are you retiring? Who you're spending time with? Are there causes that are important to you, that you can participate in? Like, where I see people struggle with that transition the most is when people don't have something that they're retiring to. And it's like, no, you can't just, call it a day in your business and just go home and watch TV all day. I mean, that might be very attractive for a week or two, but believe me, you're not going to be happy after a while. So, you brought up stage advisors. Like, tell me a little bit more about what you've seen business owners do in terms of that specific role.
Yeah, I've put a lot of a lot of hours in of thinking about this, because it's such an important concept in time in
Mm.
people's lives. So I call it like, and I don't know if I've coined this. There's probably someone who has. So if they have, I apologize. But it's basically, it's a purpose vacuum, and that's really what we're experiencing with these people. And they retire and they have this purpose vacuum, and then they end up wanting to do a second career, or they go back to work because they don't know what to do themselves, because all of their purpose and their identity is wrapped up into the business, as you said. And so what it really is, there's two things here that are most important for somebody retiring, because I've talked to many of these types of people. Is number one, it's that they find, like you said, something of purpose. If they were running their business and that was their whole life, well, they're in trouble. They better find, either faith practices or causes, something beyond just playing golf and watching TV, that's going to, right, give them nourishment and purpose. So that's number one of the purpose side. The other side is what they're really craving. And the people I've seen, like a John Maxwell, for example, who is still working at like 78 or however old he is, because he's living in his God-given gifts and talents. Like, you don't have to retire. You could just keep working till you're 80 if you get nourishment and you're getting fulfillment and energy from the work you do. He looks younger because he's living in his gifts most of the time, right? And so I call a sage advisor, in terms of, like, everyone would have a different role of what sage advisor is. One of my owners, his sage advisor role is really, he's in the shop and he gets to kind of like tinker around and manage the shop. He's not involved in leadership anymore, because that's not really where he gets energy. He loves just like problem solving and just kind of staying active and busy. So that's his sage advisor role, right? I have another one where his sage advisor, he's more of an inventor. So ideas and evaluating situations, and he's high on what's called enablement. So he loves being in groups and connecting with people, and just building relationships and serving. And so his sage advisor role is going to be more like supporting his son, who's building the business, and also being out with other business owners and just building relationships, just those high value relationships. And he does that all day, or does that most of the time. He's as happy as you can be, and it's high value for the company. So if you can transition in that way, you don't necessarily have to leave the business, but part-time, doing only the things that you love, and that provides maximum value for the company. That to me is a dream retirement,
Yeah.
And then if you do sell the business completely, then you really do need to find maybe a part-time, in volunteer role with an organization, but leveraging your gifts, not just saying, hey, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it, because you will not last. It has to be intentional and purpose-filled. It's got to be both.
Absolutely. No, I think that is so spot on, and in so many respects. And to add to this, I think a place and a point where a lot of business owners can kind of struggle is they don't know what they need to have in their retirement accounts to be financially secure. And so when you're able to, with certainty, be able to know that, hey, yes, I have what I need, right? I've clearly defined what passions or hobbies or activities or volunteering work I'm going to do in my retirement, and I kind of have an idea what I want to do in terms of like continue to be involved in the business, but not necessarily have to rely on that income. Like once you go through that process, like then you can walk away with like knowing like, okay, I need X amount of dollars in order to be able to exit the business. And I've seen where like business owners haven't gone through that personal inventory, I would say, and so from that standpoint, they're a little bit stressed out because they feel like they need more and that they're not going to have enough in retirement, and so they just keep working and keep doing the same thing, and it just like prolongs this whole process. So I think going through that whole exercise like holistically as an individual is just incredibly constructive and incredibly important, and allows these business owners to arrive at that number and be able to execute with confidence and intentionality.
Yeah, and I want to hear more on that. I just want to add one little thing, and then keep going into the tangible and those financial, because I know that a lot of them are like, well, give me the bottom line, give me what I need, right? But I just want to hit on the fact that the other piece that I didn't talk about is, there's a transition, just like when your children transition out of the home in adulthood. There's also that transition where you go from being gone in the office, 40, 50 hours a week, to being at home with your wife or husband, the entire time. And I think there's that also a need to kind of like reinvigorate and find purpose within your spousal relationship. You have one, and that's where Working Genius also helps, of like helping them develop that. Okay, let's work together on let's imagine what is the ideal next phase. We're living longer as humans, so like as a couple, like let's understand each other better. Let's deep dive into each other. Let's figure out what does this look like for us now that we have to spend a lot more time together, so we have a really high functioning partnership. And I think that's kind of a piece of it that I don't think people talk about much, but I hear them grumbling about it, or like the wife or husband grumbling. They're like, oh, he's under my thumb now all the time. This is really, really frustrating.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and honestly, like, I sit around with people and I tell, I'm a part-time marriage counselor, right? Because like, these are the types of conversations I do have. And, as part of my process, like really what I'm trying to draw out of both spouses is, common goals, common vision, and the common core values. And when you have all of those components very clearly outlined, clearly identified, it allows the couple to work together in partnership with each other. Without going through that core process, it becomes very easy for one spouse to try to override the other spouse because of their perspective and their way of doing things. And so like, just again, being able to get on the same page, go through those core values, vision for the future, financial goals, and get everybody on the same page together. It really helps reduce a lot of the friction when it comes to talking about money, making money decisions. I mean, when you look at, marriages and the highest source of conflict within marriage, finance is one of them. And so again, I found that like walking through that process together, and being that neutral third party is very, very helpful to, transitioning finances to maybe being a source of conflict to being a source of unity.
Well, and there's this really cool exercise through Working Genius. It's called Crave versus Crushed. And if you have a couple that's going through that, like core values, 100% important. But then from those core values, understanding each person, what do they need and what do they not need in terms of what kind of makes them go like this as a couple, like having those things mapped out with each other and then sharing with each other. For example, like if one of the spouses doesn't feel like their voice is heard, they might have higher discernment and they want to be trusted, or at the very least, the opportunity to evaluate
Mhm.
a decision and have a voice in it. And if the other spouse just kind of like it doesn't have high discernment or has high discernment but and doesn't ask the other person for their insights, then that creates like high levels of friction that could be avoided if they just knew and had the awareness of like, oh, so when we're making this financial decision, I need to not jump ahead, even though I'm naturally kind of an impulsive jump ahead person, and I need to consult with my partner
Yeah.
because she will feel really pissed if I do not get her way in and make her feel valued, and that her voice and or his voice and their insights matter. Stuff like that. Like if they can have like a little bit of that understanding, it just makes such a difference. Where yeah, core values are aligned and they understand each other, and
Yeah.
then it creates such an open dialogue where the expert can come in and really provide maestro type service.
Absolutely, and that is one of the things I absolutely love about my role in people's lives, is just being able to, help again be that part-time marriage counselor of sorts.
I
So
got a question. I got a question for you. So let's say you're a business owner and
yeah,
you're looking to retire in the
yep,
next, let's say, 3 years.
okay,
Um, what would be some of the steps from the more operational or financial and administrative side? What are some of those steps that they should know as like things that you can help them with that are essential for that process to be successful? Are there any like tips or steps that you would say like here's some of the things that you have to do, especially if you're going to keep the company in the family or in employees in the employee base.
yeah, no,
Any thoughts on that?
absolutely. So I mean, we already kind of talked about it, but step number one is define your number. What is your walkaway number? Is it $5 million? Is it $20 million? Like what is that number, right? And then once you have that, we can take an inventory of the existing assets that you have, the way they're positioned, and if there is a gap between your existing assets, then we can start to look at the valuation of the company, right? And so we can start to involve the right individuals in that whole process, be it business brokers, CPAs, attorneys, getting a solid valuation, understanding the implications of taxes, whether or not we have the right tax entity for this liquidation, right? Making certain elections can make a significant difference in taxes. So going like understanding those components, like that is the starting point. Now,
Yeah.
if for example, it's a highly profitable business and the owner hasn't quite saved enough, like we can look at different vehicles to help accelerate some of that saving. So we're not necessarily relying as much on an equity sale. There's
Mm.
things like a cash balance retirement plan, right? And this
Mhm.
is kind of like a hybrid between your traditional pension plan and a 401k plan. It's kind of somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
But the contribution amounts that you can save into a cash balance retirement plan significantly larger than a 401k plan, right?
Mm.
So once we have an idea of like, okay, yes, there's a little bit of a gap here, then we can start to explore the different vehicles to start saving the right way in a very tax efficient manner, and just make sure that everything lines up. So that way, when you do go to sell a business, whether it's to the next generation or private equity or to another organization within that industry, like when you go to negotiations and you know
Mhm.
exactly what your number is, it makes that whole process so much easier.
Hmm.
So much easier, right? Because you
I
have
can see
confidence,
that.
you have peace of mind, you know exactly where you need to be at, you also know the value of the organization. So, if you're selling internally to family members that you want to, see and be successful, do you need to potentially get maximum value for the equity sale of your business? Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're okay discounting it a little bit, just to make their debt load a little bit less burdensome. So I think starting there just opens so many doors, and the mechanics of each businesses and each business owner situation is going to be very unique, and which instruments we use and apply, again, going to be unique to the circumstances and the goals. But that is the starting point.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that I've heard from some of my clients is is like, which is better from a tax perspective. Obviously, we live in a state that likes taxes, and and so understanding helping them understand like which are the ones that are more advantageous, from a tax perspective. I do you get people asking about that at all, like in terms of?
Absolutely. And this is where involving either their existing tax professional, if they have a solid relationship, or introducing the right tax professional can make a big difference, because we can look at like, okay, well, if we sell the organization as this tax structure, what are the implications? What does it look like with this other tax structure, right? And so just making sure that we're doing it in the most tax efficient manner as possible is very, very helpful. And again, that's one of the reasons why I brought up cash balance retirement plans. Like the amount that we can shelter in taxes through that, absolutely phenomenal. So again, knowing the right levers to pull in the right situation is incredibly beneficial.
So maybe one or two last questions, but I look at there's different ways that we can incentivize key employees to stay. There's one levy or one trigger or pulley, you could say, that would be when you can inspire them and show them their path and their relevance and the future that lies ahead, right? And the potential for growth as both a leader and maybe in ownership, or just getting some equity, or just having like a really good career, right? So I feel like there's that side of it, like a thriving, successful career working for a great company. But then what about incentives on the side that you work on? Like what do you find to be like key incentives, so that if there is this owner or these leaders who are working for the company and they've got these next generation guys and gals, and usually right now they're all in their like 30s and 40s, right? There are a lot of millennials and then some Gen X. Like, what does that look like in terms of any of the top incentives or things that can be leveraged that you provide that for them or help them with, that can provide some added value for them not wanting to leave?
Yeah, no, super great question. And so I'm going to start with what I think is going to be the most commonly and readily accessible to small businesses. I mean, each small business is going to have different situations in terms of consistent cash flow and profitability, et cetera, right? So if we're talking about the generation that is serious about their career, they're I wouldn't necessarily say early career employees, but employees that been in the battle for a bit, they're starting families. I think as basic as it sounds, like having a really high quality 401k offering does make a difference. And let me dive into some of the specifics of this. So when I look at an organization's 401k plan, I dive into what's called the plan design. So these are like some of the specific features of the plan. So when people can start participating in the plan, the employer contribution, looking at potentially doing what's called profit sharing within that plan. And, really looking at, okay, as a business, hey, this is how, we can look at cash flow and the resources, and maybe there's a specific number that we're working with. Maybe you want to set aside, $500,000 in a year, as benefits, to staff members, right? So if that's the number we're working for, we can work backwards from that. We can look at the demographics of the organization as a whole and be able to tailor the employer contributions in a way that's motivating, exciting, and incentivizes these employees to stick around long term. So when we look at, for example, an employer match or profit sharing, we can add what's called vesting, or have a vesting schedule, meaning that over a period of years, the employer contribution gradually becomes fully theirs. So if they were to leave after 5 or 6 years, they're able to take all the money with them, not just their employee contributions. So it helps incentivize employees to stick around longer. Plus, if there's just good communication and surrounding the overall profitability of the company, and good communication surrounding profit sharing, if employees know and understand, like, hey, if I do my job effectively, profit sharing in my 401k plan is going to be higher, that's going to be motivating for people. And I've seen where people, as they start to make these contributions, they see the account balances grow over time. And there's this transition which happens when people are confident about their long-term financial stability and financial security. Moving to a company that might pay $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 more, it's not going to be nearly as tempting.
No, I think you're spot on, and that's great information and great knowledge, and I'm really hoping that companies will go down that road. I think it's part of building, a people first organization, whether you're a family business or a small to medium sized business, but how are you creating avenues and opportunities for your employees to thrive?
Totally.
Right.
I agree 100%. Like, if you don't have a good company culture, like whatever you put in a 401k plan, it's not going to matter, right? But if you have a healthy company culture and you're doing these things that we're talking about, having a good quality offering that incentivizes people to stay longer and is more generous than the industry standard, like, that is the cherry on top, where people are like, man, I have this amazing ice cream sundae. And oh, by the way, I know I'm financially secure if I stay here. Like, cherry on top. They're not going to walk away from that ice cream sundae.
Yeah, that might be some cream and then some whipping cream and the cherry. That might be a little bit of both on there.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, 100%. Maybe I'm understating it here. The whipped cream and cherry on top. I'm comfortable with that too.
Well, and I want to throw something out there that ties into what you're saying. And it's really important, is that Patrick Lencioni, if you're talks about this, it's one of his core concepts, is this idea that there's these 4 disciplines. And if you're a family business and you're trying to create that strong culture and also strategic clarity and planning, you have to go through these 4 disciplines. And those 4 disciplines are, you create a cohesive leadership team, and then you cascade those cohesive teams throughout the organization, right? The second one is that strategic clarity. So everybody's clear on what is going on in terms of the values, the purpose, the strategy, all that stuff. But then the third one and the fourth one is where it ties in what you just said. So the third one is like really reinforcing and really building a communication plan that gets everybody aligned and on board. And the fourth one is, you have to take what you created as like, here's who we are, and actually live it out. And one of the ways, usually most companies are like, oh no, we're super, employee focused, and we're all about our employees and investing in them and taking care of them. And then they have a horrible 401k or no matching, right? No profit sharing. And it's like, okay, your integrity is being definitely in flux right now, because if your words and what you put on your clear strategy doesn't match what you actually are doing in terms of how you're investing and the decisions you're making, the systems you're putting in place, if they don't align, you become the worst thing. Hypocrites.
Totally.
The worst thing a leader can be to diffuse any level of engagement in a company and to completely make what you're trying to do not work is to be a hypocrite. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I see that a lot with companies. You got to build that momentum so that your value is higher on being able to sell and have profitability. But if you're a hypocrite and you're not actually aligned with what you say and what you do, then all your work, all your efforts are going to go down the old tubes.
Yeah. And there's 2 things that I'd like to add to that, Justin. One of which is, I feel like many organizations and many business owners, like, they are not in the business or wanting to be in the business of running a 401k plan. Right?
No.
That is not their policy,
No,
right?
thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, right? So that's where working with like the right professional to take a lot of those responsibilities, a lot of the day-to-day obligations off your plate, working with developing a good HR process behind that all, it's like critically important. But I feel like so many 401ks out there are just absolutely broken because there isn't a fundamental question being asked. And that question is, what is the goal of this 401k benefit? And unfortunately, there's a lot of like one-stop shops where we have, hey, this 401k plan in a box. Like if you want a 401k plan, we'll rush you through the process and we'll get you live as quickly as we can. But we're not
You'll
gonna
save money,
exactly
but it's not gonna be great.
Exactly, right? They don't take the time to like fundamentally ask, okay, what are the core goals of what we're trying to accomplish from a holistic benefits perspective here? And when I talk to HR teams and business owners, like one of the things that I love doing is just pulling up the industry standards relative to the 401k benefits that their industry is offering. So if you're in construction, or if you're in the services industry or the food industry, like looking at like the average employer matching contribution, the average eligibility or waiting period to be able to participate in the plan. And so now like we can craft their 401k plan to be above industry average. And now that HR person who's making these hires, when they're talking to potential candidates, they could be like, hey, we looked at the benefits and we want to make sure that you're going to be financially secure in the long term. We want you to stay with us long term. The average employer match for the industry is X percentage.
Yeah.
We're going to do more. And as a potential job candidate, like that becomes crazy attractive. It's like, okay, this organization cares about me. They care about my long-term success and well-being. Like it makes that hiring process so much easier. And when we look at like what's happening right now in small businesses, like there's a war for talent. And I feel like a lot of small businesses feel like they can't compete with some of the bigger organizations, but like that is just not true when it comes to 401k plans. Like you can put together an excellent 401k package and it's not going to cost nearly as much as you may expect. And we can put it together in a way where it's better than a lot of these bigger companies. And so again, I think this is, obviously I'm passionate about it. I love what I do. But this is something that gets overlooked all the time. Now, that was the first thing. So I apologize for being a little bit long-winded. The second thing I wanted to bring up, I was listening to this Christian podcast, and they were talking about the metrics of success for a business. And from a Christian perspective, one of the things that I think is super important to integrate and incorporate in this perspective is obviously we can look at profitability. Profitability is very easy, to point out, and it's a clear metric that we can see and understand. But how does this company or organization, how do they take care and care about their employees?
Yeah.
Right. And so when it comes to looking at the benefits, I think that's one of the ways that an organization can clearly articulate their values and their care. And again, like Justin, as you pointed out earlier in our discussion today, like key employees and successful employees, like they're one of the greatest assets that you have.
Yeah, I would say 100%. And I'd say the other key thing that's the other main asset, especially if you're trying to sell the business, like there's revenue, profitability, those things, but it's reputation.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you have a reputation that's built on trust and that people come to you, like I have a client that's like that, like they've focused on building that reputation built on trust, quality service, taking care of their people. And now they have people coming to them during a time where other people are slow, they're busy, they can't get enough people. And yet they're not doing anything that's sexy or crazy. They're just taking care of their people, building a strong culture, and developing standards of excellence of how they're going to commit and hold accountable to strong standards, and working together and leveraging working genius and putting people in a position to succeed. And I believe that those organizations, some of them have what you do, but they all need to have that as like you said, as you're getting that word out there that you guys are great to work for. You come in, and one of the ways that you're showing that with your actions is how you take care of your people. And one of the ways you do that is, profit sharing, 401k, things along those lines, and so I'm a big proponent that you match the actions with the words and the words with the actions.
Yeah.
And what you do is a key way that they can do that.
Absolutely.
How can people find you with the great work you do around exit strategy planning and 401ks and all of those different things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's super easy. You can go to my website, DominickAntonCFP.com. You can see a lot of the content that I have on there, and it's very easy to schedule a consult with me. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, they can go to my LinkedIn page, Justin Studebaker. Also, my website is www.symphoneo.com. It's like symphony, except instead of the Y, it's an EO. I went for the most confusing business name possible, but it does have a cool Greek. It's Greek for harmonious agreement within teams. So it kind of fits what I do, even though it's hard to pronounce or say. So.
Love it. Well,
And,
Justin, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was good. Thank you. This has been a pleasure. Like you're a good friend, and it's always fun to spend time discussing these topics that we're both really passionate about.
Absolutely. I had such a fun time today, and this won't be our last discussion. So for our audience, stay tuned for more, and can't wait to, again, have another awesome discussion with you, Justin.
Yeah, we'll keep the laughs and the good times going.
Rock and roll.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and God bless.